Hello everybody, my name is Ben Coleman. I'm one of your many hosts here for the Florida Aviation Network. We're coming to you live and in the clear from the Florida Air Museum at the Sun and Fun Complex near Central Florida Aerospace Academy in the county of Polk in Lakeland Linder Regional Airport in the state of Florida in the United States of America. And I'm proud to be here, and hopefully if you're enjoying watching this from the stream on your computer or in the comfort of your living room, we wish that you were walking around here because it's a beautiful day here in Central Florida. The air show is about ready to kick off, and it's just always a pleasure here at the 44th Annual Sun and Fun International Convention and Fly-In to see all the people from all walks of earth. Almost every country in the world is represented here in some way, shape, or form. And what we do here is exchange information about the industry and technology and what's coming up new and different and exciting. And we're usually faced with the new electronic way that the technology is having an impact on aviation. The new little boxes in the airplane, the glass panels. Used to be only the airlines, not so much anymore. We're putting them in home-built aircraft now. And technology takes its different paths in many different ways. And anybody ever thought about tires? Tires, could there be any new technology in tires? We have a gentleman here with us, our next guest, Mr. James Scheller. James?
Thank you, Ben.
It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
And tires, you
Right.
know a little bit about the tires and the industry and the process.
I know a little bit about tires in the process, yeah, and I appreciate you having me come on Florida Aviation Network.
Well, and James, I must admit and thank you because you're also the sponsor of our Ready Room here at the Florida Aviation Network.
Well, thank you.
Taking care of our volunteers and all of our volunteers. Everybody here is a volunteer. There's no paid staff putting on these productions for you.
That's great.
Maybe you don't realize that, but James and his lovely wife Trish is so helpful when they give us the refreshments, and it's just so welcome. Thank you.
Thank
again.
you. Well, thank you.
James, Garnetread. It's some people, particularly Obi Young, he has a hard time understanding Garnetread.
Well, garnet, thanks, Ben. Garnet is a semi-precious stone, and the larger particles they make jewelry and earrings out of. Now, we have a process whereby we incorporate the garnet stone into rubber tires at roughly a 10 to 20% mix, and that gives us additional traction on ice, snow, wet, and dry pavements. And we did extensive testing over the years with the product from different federal agencies and state agencies. And basically, it's just increasing the traction on the tire. It can increase wear in certain durometer compounds, but it's mainly for safety for cars and aircraft, for takeoff landings and taxiing in wet and dry, and we can use them year-round.
James, I'm curious, how did you get your start in with this particular type of business? I mean, you obviously know a lot about it, but you had to start somewhere. Where'd you go?
Well, it started with my dad. Actually, he gave me a truck driving job, and I worked for my dad.
You know, in other words, he made you drive a truck.
Yeah, basically, I started driving truck pretty young age, actually. And we worked for the Sunshine Mining Company. And what we did there was we chained up our truck sometimes in the wintertime because I had to drive the truck, and my dad did too, along this treacherous road. It was a very dangerous road.
Well, this in Central Florida, or where?
Well, this is in northern Idaho out of Coeur d'Alene, and we get a lot of ice and snow at times. And during those times, why we would have to chain up sometimes. But the main focus was when I saw a bridge in northern Idaho. The Idaho State Department of Highways coated the bridge with a garnet material, and they used epoxy coatings in different processes. And then I got the idea, well, maybe I could put that into rubber tires, into truck tires, and use it for traction. It would eliminate a lot of times driving on the dangerous roads. So initially, that's how I got that started.
So they would actually take this garnet material and adhere it to the road surface.
Yes, on the bridges.
And you got an idea of, well, they're going to adhere it to the bridges, why don't we adhere it to the tires?
That's correct. And what I did was my very first tire with the garnet material was coating a single tire with epoxy type coatings and flexible coatings. But that lasted on the road about 2 hours and 15 seconds. And so
that's not very long duration.
So I was disappointed, but then I realized this will have to be mixed in with the rubber in a rubber mill or some type of process, how they process it. And so then I took the material down to Les Schwab in Oregon at that time, and I worked with Harlan Schwab, which is Les Schwab's son. And Harlan Schwab and I made the very first 4 test tires. And Harlan Schwab unfortunately died in an accident after that, a motorcycle accident. It kind of put a stop on it at that point, but that's initially how it got started.
And this is in the 70s or?
Yeah, the 70s, late 70s.
Okay. James, what brought you to the thought of the application in aviation in this industry? Why aviation?
Well, actually, Larry Moore gave me the impetus to pursue it in aviation. And when I was thinking of the tires, well, I thought, well, aviation safety, aviation stopping ability, aviation landing and takeoffs and taxiing and things like this would help the aviation industry. And that's how it got started. So I met Larry and then I met you, and that's how it progressed. Plus, I happen to be helping, well, I don't help them, I actually own the hangar where the Switchblade is being pursued, and that Switchblade is a flying car, and I mentioned that to Sam Sampson, and he wanted to try it on his prototype vehicles for the flying car, and so we got 4 test tires made for him and incorporated that into some tests, and Sam did testing on taxiway, runway tests, and things like this on the taxiway on a slalom course. And he did turning and twisting and things like this over and above what he normally had on the tire without the garnet. And then he could see the advantages, and he wants to incorporate this particular product in the Switchblade on the Aurora and the Snowbird.
And this is for the Switchblade, and if you haven't seen Sam Bosefield's Samson Motors Switchblade, that's worth your time and effort to go to the internet.
Yeah, it's a wonderful idea and a project, and they're progressing pretty good on that. They're really doing some really, really interesting engineering.
Well, it's a feather in your cap because he's wanting to incorporate this process. And when you just mentioned about the compound and now the wear, sometimes in some cases it could help the duration of the tire. Other times it might wear faster, but it's not the purpose of making a tire life longer. It's for making the tire perform better in a safer environment when you need a friction coefficient with your surface.
That's right, and that kind of programmed us into testing it with Washington State University and the Federal Highway Department. Some of the Federal Highway Department funds were in part of the testing program at Washington State on a test track, and they had pavement overlays of concrete and asphalt, and we did testing with the garnet stone tire that I got made, and then truck tires and studded tires. And in the pavement overlay tests, it wears out the roads at only 10% of studded tires. And that got the attention then of the highway departments in Oregon, Washington, and Minnesota and Michigan, because their problem is studded tire wear on the pavement.
Oh yeah.
And so we can give year-round traction without as much wear on the road surfaces. And in our case, it's an approved traction device for Washington, Oregon, Minnesota, and Michigan, and Idaho, and we don't have to take the tires off. Now, I'm not saying this is a substitute for studded tires, but I am saying it's an alternative, and it's a good alternative. And studs do save a lot of people from stopping distances and things like this, and increases that, but studdeds also increase the stopping distances on wet and dry pavement.
And you know, you never stop and think about, of course, in Florida, seldom do we have to put our chains and studs on. But out west, I mean, it really does eat the pavement and the concrete.
Yeah.
It really does wear the roads out.
Yeah. Well, we can use these. We use these tires year round. We keep them on year round, and we've had tests in the hot Arizona weather and the cold weather of Montana, and they just hold up year round, and they're a good product.
Well, James, what are the numbers? Are we talking about how many tires do you know that have Garnetread in the tread of the tire? About how many do we have out there running around in the world or in the country? Or?
Well, we've produced approximately, I'm just estimating, about 100,000 tires overall since the inception. Right now we're working on a newer process whereby we coat the material and it adheres under vulcanization in the tire. So we have a new patent pending process on that in conjunction to our last patent.
How about the supply of garnet, the garnet stone?
That's not going to be a problem. We have that. We have alluvial deposits in northern Idaho that supply a lot of our product, and we have an endless supply of garnet in that size.
That's good to hear.
The gemstones are a little harder to find.
The pretty ones that you wear, and a lot of folks, they don't realize that, you know, garnet is actually one of the birthstones.
It's for January birthstone, yeah.
And because when I try to explain what a garnet is, people say, garnet tread, what? Well, you familiar with the January birthstone?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the jewels? Yeah.
Yeah.
This stuff is in the tires.
Well, garnet has a hardness of 7 and diamond is 10. And
this is the MOHS scale.
MOH.
Okay.
And the reason why garnet works well in the tire industry too is it doesn't pit the rubber molds like other man-made products does. It doesn't react under heat and chemistry because it's a natural stone. So it's a good alternative for that too.
James, and I didn't realize that, and I was a tire, I'm not going to say tire idiot, but I was not as in tune with tires as I am now from learning to do a little bit of research on this. But you know, natural rubber is white. And that's what I didn't realize.
Sap out of the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember now some of the old cars, they had white tires.
Yeah.
And I thought that they were the specialty tires. No, it was raw natural rubber.
Yeah, a lot of that is, they mix carbon black and sulfur in different recipes. It's like a cake recipe, and different companies have different recipes. The military has a separate recipe than, say, you or I on our regular rubber tires. And aircraft tires are built differently too. They're much stronger. They have better casing activity with the buildability of it and the radialness of it. But actually 7 out of 10 fleets actually do retread tires.
And for the aircraft tires, and again, when I was growing up, and I think we see now an aircraft tire for the benefit of those radio listeners, because this has gone over radio as well. Managing safety. The tires actually, you can, in some cases, after you wear down the initial layer
of the
you
new
can
tire?
actually see the garnet stone in
the
tire.
Yeah, you can see the garnet stone after about 75 miles.
And you can actually take a blade or something and pull it over the tire.
Scrape it, yeah, you can feel the surface tension changes from the rubber to the hardness to the rubber to the hardness. And the vulcanization that we do now with the coating process, it adheres into the rubber under vulcanization, under heat and pressure, far more better than our original process.
Well, James, I can see an application of this in aviation, and as a matter of fact, since I've gotten to know you, when I hear about an aircraft in the wintertime slide off the end of a runway, for example, back before the election, I think Vice President Pence in a 737 landed in severe weather, and it was icy, snowy runway.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I think that was at LaGuardia.
Oh.
And LaGuardia is a place that you really don't want to go off the end of the runway, and some of them you have to go for a swim at LaGuardia.
I see.
But and I happen to think now this is a perfect application that if I was flying that aircraft, I went for the binders.
Right.
And of course it's got anti-skid, but I would sure want to know that I had
Extra traction.
everything that I had going for me between
nice.
the airplane and the pavement, which between you is ice.
Yeah, you can tell when you have these tires on a passenger car right away on wet pavement. There's a big difference. It's a very comforting. It's a comforting feeling when you have that on there. That steerability and braking, you can sense it.
Well, it has to be a natural. Again, in aircraft tires, people think that those grooves are for traction and for dispersing water, but those are wear grooves. Actually, tires before those wear grooves were put in there by the manufacturer again, they were slick. They were ball.
Yeah.
And they were figured that would get the most contact with the runway surface.
Yeah.
However, that also allows you to hydroplane a lot easier at a certain formula.
I see.
As far as speed and
like a ski.
Yeah, and then you're just kind of skating on the runway.
Sure.
Joel Wiener's never done that before, has he? Joel Wiener's just hydroplaning all over the place.
Huh.
But that's one of our camera folks, guys. That's the reason I mentioned that. I'm pointing at Joe at Camper 3. I'm fascinated by the application. What agencies other than the highway are you working with?
We worked at Washington State University Test Track. The test track, John Cook was the head engineer there at that time, and the Federal Highway Administration put in funds for highway testing along with Washington State Highway Department and some from Oregon State Highway Department. And I believe also the Idaho State Highway Department. And they've made several manuals on the different testing characteristics of just regular rubber on asphalt and concrete and regular rubber and garnet rubber and also studded tires. But the big thing at that time was trying to save our highways. And again, studs do a good job on ice at 32 degrees, but we also did radar testing with our tires at ice rinks with the Highway Patrol of Washington and Oregon at 10 miles an hour, and we can stop quicker than studs on ice at 32 degrees than studs.
Wow.
And pavement, and wet pavement and dry pavement, because those studs are actually slick like that. Oh, yeah. But I don't want to run down studs. The main thing is safety. The main thing is safety, and the gripping ability and the performance is just an increase in its availability for the public, both in aviation and commercial.
Sure. James, as far as the number of, and I wasn't aware of this until, again, I came to be your acquaintance, but retread, for anybody like to recycle or you save the world, save the earth, and take care of our resources? Recycling retread tires, and again, my dad said, stay away from recaps, son. Yeah, they're going to throw a tread, they come off, and it leaves you stranded. Well, it's a different day. I mean,
it is. It is. What's happened in the early parts of retreading, it's a kind of a new process, and there were some projects that weren't very good with retreading industry, but now Garnetread is a member of the Retread Tire Association. And if anyone wants to see what the advantages and the possibilities of retreads, this material here, this DVD will explain that. And Jeffrey Parks will be glad to, I'll send you, anyone interested in these, I will send you free information on the retread industry. And like I said, about 7 out of 10 fleets do recycling, retreading. It's a green process, it's a green tire. Everyone wants to save energy, and they're half the price of a new tire. They are half the price. So the trucking agencies and the fleets, they save a lot of money, and many times they get even more life out of the tire than the original new tire. So what they're doing is they're buying a new tire, which they have to do at times, many times, and then they'll wear that tire down that surface to the buffing zone about 2-3 seconds. They'll put it on a buffing wheel, buff that out, and then they'll put a new layer of rubber on it. And the new layer of rubber may be any additive. In this case, we work with the garnet to put a new layer of additive, 10% by weight to rubber for traction. And that's it. And about 50% of the tires, new tires now, actually about 50% roughly, are retreaded. And that retread or recycle, whatever you want to say it, you've got big companies like Band-Aid that are huge providers of pre-cure rubber for the fleets. They do a fantastic job. Their technology is improved dramatically, and they're worldwide. There's a lot of good retread equipment, but the technology and the processing and the improvement has just dramatically increased over the last 50 years.
Is there any international activity with Garnetread?
Not that I know. Oh, yeah, there is activity with Garnetread. Nova Scotia Eastern Tire Service. If you want garnets for some of your vehicles, you may want to call Eastern Tire Service in Nova Scotia, and we work directly with them on a lot of our production stuff. Also with the Zamboni ice machines, we've been providing tires for them as well. But
you're talking about the Zambonis that cleans the ice skating rinks.
The ice skate rinks, we like that because it gives a smoother surface for the ice skating people that does the twirling and the acting and
in hockey.
Yeah, and the hockey players too. Because if you get little divots in the ice, it can cause a problem. You know, you could trip and whatnot like that.
Sure.
But the Zamboni is an exceptional use for it. It's not a normal use for it because we do increase the percentage on the Zamboni of the Garnetread, whereas we wouldn't do that on regular cars or airplanes.
James, I know that you have had some discussions with the FAA, and,
yes.
And right now, the only thing that's holding this back from being offered as an option for aviation use is certification standards. Mm-hmm. And from what I understand, there's no adverse results from using Garnet in an aircraft tire. It only enhances the performance of a tire.
Yeah.
So
the safety.
how are we going to get beyond this certification, or not beyond it? We're not going to work around it. We're going to run through it as far as the process.
Yeah, I've talked to the FAA about certification processes and what we have to do in order to certify it. And there's certain regulations we're working on with some of the manufacturers to meet those demands or those requirements. And we've currently started that process just recently.
Okay. Well, I dare to say that it probably will add $1 or $2 to the tire. But what are you going to gain from that extra expense from having a Garnetread tire as opposed to just a standard tread tire?
Yeah, and they're a lot of fun.
And you're going to get a little safer, a little more friction coefficient,
yeah,
more traction, more stopping action,
yeah,
if you will.
Yeah.
James, the patent aspect is very curious. I know the patent is pending. But where do we stand as far as if somebody else was wanting to take this technology and run off with it and create a better mousetrap?
We have the original process is patented, and now we've instigated a secondary patent process because we're coating the material now with an additive that adheres to the rubber under vulcanization. So that's part of our process that we're working on right now with Washington, D.C. and the U.S. Patent Office.
Wow. James, where do you go from here? What's your next big event with the tire Garnetread process?
We're just going forward.
Move forward?
Do whatever we can to keep it going.
Okay, and any folks, I do think that you have a relationship with some rubber compound manufacturers.
Yeah.
And primarily I didn't realize this, Singapore and Malaysia.
Yeah, we have strip stock that we get from Malaysia with the garnet impregnated in it. They mix it on their rubber mill there, and then they ship it to you. I've shipped garnet to Malaysia, and they ship strip stock to us whenever we want to. There is a time lag there, though, quite a bit of time lag, and so what we need is more manufacturers here in the United States, because we're working overseas. It takes time to get the ships there, get the ships back. But we have 400 pounds of strip stock. 200 pounds are in a particular location that retreads some tires for us. And when we're working with the post office now on some test tires. with regards to 195-75R14s and 195-75R15s right now as a test program for the United States Post Office. And so we've had some good inquiry and response to that. But it's just an ongoing process. It's something you just got to keep going and keep going forward. And awareness, like this program here, will make more people aware of what's out there and the possibilities for the product.
Well, and again, I'm going to come back to what I started off with, is usually new technology is electronics and avionics, and you get into what's new in aviation. And it really kind of is stimulating to think of something new coming up in something as simple as a tire. And we all have taken for granted the tires. Everybody knows when a tire is worn and worn out. Of course, when it's worn completely out, like Joel Wiener knows, you land with your feet on the brakes, and we call it a bullseye.
Oh, he has a bush plane?
He flies a lot of airplanes up in the Jacksonville area, but he has students that like to land with their feet on the brakes. That's a bad combination.
Oh, yeah.
And but that's why when we get them flying on the Garnetread tires, take it easy on these tires. Be especially cautious not to land with the brakes, because that rubber and the garnet in that rubber is your friend.
Yeah.
It's just I'm looking forward to, for many reasons, I'm looking forward to the days when you can see standard tread, or you want garnet tread, and seeing a G embossed in the sidewall of the tire, when it's got the garnet stone impregnated. And the process, I know that there's broadcast when the rubber is in its molten state, and then there's the screw method to knurl it into the tread. And then it goes into a form, and then they squeeze it. And cook it, vulcanize it.
They vulcanize it under heat and pressure.
Well, James, is there anything else? We've got about another 30 seconds before we wrap this up.
No. Like I said, if anyone is interested in the process of retreading, how it's done, the availability of it, and how well known it is, it's used in the military, it's used in the post office, FedEx, and most of your 7 out of 10 fleets are all doing retreading, and it just saves 50% over a new tire cost. And it's a fantastic way to go, and it's a lot of people, and the testimonies on this particular video by the Retread Tire Association, they actually get more mileage in some instances out of retreading than they do their original tire.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, it's a fascinating industry. Both aviation and the tire industry is fascinating. So let's see if we can't blend these together. And put garnet, we want to spread it out all over the runways across the nation and the world, for that matter.
That's great.
James, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
And again, thank you for being a sponsor to our group.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. Okay, that's another wrap here on the Florida Aviation Network. And again, it's just, you never know what you're going to learn about the industry here. And who would have thought we would have been sitting around talking about tires? But if you stop and think about it, it's where the rubber meets the runway. See you later. Ben Coleman, one of your hosts here, and we will talk to you next interview.